Sometimes a UI update can be expensive. When it happens, interactions like typing or clicking may start to feel slow. This happens because React needs to finish rendering the update first, and that's not a great experience for users. React provides transitions to help keep the interface responsive while heavier UI updates happen in the background. Let's see how that works. Not all UI updates have the same priority. Some of them should happen immediately. For example, typing into an input field or clicking a button. These are urgent updates. Other updates can wait a little longer. For example, rendering a large list or a content-heavy tab. These are non-urgent updates. Transitions lets us mark those updates as lower priority, so React can respond to user interactions first. Let's look at a simple example. Here we have a small tab interface with 3 tabs: Overview, Contacts, and About. Now let's look at the code. Inside the demo component, we keep the active tab ID in state. Next, we render a tab button for each tab. For every button, we pass the tab ID, the label, whether the tab is currently active, and the setTab function as onSelect. Inside tab button, when the button is clicked, it simply calls onSelect with the tab ID. That updates the selected tab state in the parent component. React then renders the content of the selected tab. The Contacts tab renders a very large list of 50,000 fake contacts. Because this list is large, rendering it can take noticeable time. Now watch what happens when I click Contacts and then quickly click About. The About tab doesn't appear immediately. React first finishes rendering the Contacts tab before switching to About, which can make the interface feel slow or unresponsive. This is exactly the kind of situation where transitions can help. To handle situations like this, React provides a hook called useTransition. The hook returns two values: isPending, a flag that tells us when a transition is running, and startTransition, a function used to mark updates as non-urgent. When we wrap a state update in startTransition, we tell React that this work doesn't need to happen immediately. React can respond to user interactions first and complete the heavier rendering when it has time. Let's apply this to our example. Inside the button, we first import useTransition, and then we call it inside the component. From it, we get two values: the isPending flag and the startTransition function. Then, instead of calling onSelect directly, we wrap that update in startTransition, so when the button is clicked, the tab update runs inside a transition. This tells React that switching the tab content is not urgent work. The tab state still updates the same way, but React now renders the tab content in the background with lower priority. And if I click another tab before the previous render finishes, React can interrupt that work and continue with the newer update instead. Now when I switch tabs, the interaction stays responsive. useTransition also gives us the isPending flag, which we can use to reflect the transition in the UI. In our tab example, we can use isPending to show a small loading indicator while the tab content is being prepared. Inside the tab button component, when isPending is true, we add the tab pending class to the button, and we also render a small passing dot next to the label. Now when I click Contacts, The tab immediately shows that the update is in progress, while React renders the heavy content. This gives users clear feedback that something is happening. So transitions not only keep the interface responsive, they also gives us a way to reflect background work in the UI. In addition to the startTransition function returned by useTransition, React also provides a standalone startTransition function. The difference is that useTransition also gives us the isPending flag, which allows us to track the transition and show feedback in the UI. In practice, when you're working inside components, you'll usually use useTransition. The standalone startTransition is mostly useful outside React components, for example in libraries or utility code, where hooks can be used. So what actually happens when we use a transition? Normally, when React starts rendering an update, it continues that work until the render is finished. If that rendering takes a long time, the interface can feel blocked, because the browser can't handle other interactions until React completes that work. With transitions, React can treat some updates as lower priority. Instead of doing all the rendering in one uninterrupted task, React can pause that work and give control back to the browser. If a higher priority update happens, React can handle that update first and then continue working on the transition afterward. This allows the interface to stay responsive. Transitions don't make the work faster. They simply allow React to schedule rendering more intelligently. Transitions are a powerful tool, but they're most helpful in specific situations. Wrapping state updates in startTransition can cause React to process those updates separately, instead of batching them together. This may lead to additional renders. Because of that, transitions are best suited for updates that trigger expensive rendering, or take noticeable time. In those cases, they help keep the interface responsive, while the heavier work happens in the background. But we shouldn't wrap every state change in startTransition. So far, we've looked at transitions as the way to control how React schedules rendering work. In React 19, transitions go a bit further. startTransition can now also accept async functions. Functions passed to startTransition are called actions. These functions often perform async work, for example, saving data or submitting a form, while React handles the transition. In this video, I wanted to focus on how transitions work. In the next video, we'll take a closer look at actions and how they build on top of transitions. So that's the core idea behind transitions in React. A transition lets you mark a state update as non-urgent, so React can render it with lower priority and keep the UI responsive. If you found this helpful, please support the channel by liking and subscribing. Thanks for watching. In the next video, we'll dive into actions in React.